Welcome everyone to Reverse Pitch, Meet the BLD Holdings investment team. I'm Nancy Davis, Chief Creative Officer and Executive Director of both the Global Wellness Summit and Global Wellness Institute, and I'll be your host for today's call. This idea of a reverse pitch was born at our 2020 Global Wellness Summit, which was one of the first global hybrid events held both in person at the Breakers Palm Beach and virtually all over the world. There were a number of investors involved in the summit, and since COVID protocols prevented the usual socializing, which often results in business, we thought we would come up with a creative way to get some business done. We asked all of the investors present, Barry included and joining virtually, to take exactly 2 minutes to explain what they invest in and what they were looking for in a wellness company. Some were interested in seed stage investing, some late stage, but all were very interested in opening their doors to great new ideas. It worked. We have heard from several investors and delegates about the deals that were made as a result of this reverse pitch idea. And so we thought, well, let's continue this throughout the year, leading up to another reverse pitch on stage at the summit in Tel Aviv this November. So before introducing Barry, who was part of the inaugural reverse pitch last year, it's my pleasure to introduce Susie Ellis, who I hope is on the call now, Chair and CEO of both the Global Wellness Summit and Global Wellness Institute, and a foremost investor in wellness herself, to offer a word of welcome. Susie?
I don't see her on.
Okay, Susie is traveling and may have an issue with connectivity, so I will go back for Susie later. Just a quick note, everyone by now super familiar with Zoom. I'll just remind you, Beatrice is going to keep everyone muted to eliminate background noise. You can view this call in gallery or speaker view and make that choice at the top right of your window. Please use the chat function as you already are. Everybody's expert at that. Let us know where you're calling from, the name of your company, and also use that to post a question for Barry and his team. We'll try to get to some of those questions, but we do share the chat when we share the link to this recording. So you'll get a follow-up email with all of that information. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Barry Dorfman, founder and president of BLD Holdings Incorporated. Barry and I met last year during the lead up to the Global Wellness Summit at the Breakers, and has remained a good friend since, connecting me to various people in the investment industry and planning to be with us in Tel Aviv in November. I've also sent to Barry a few companies looking for investments, and he's been warm and welcoming to all. Barry is personally a wellness enthusiast with a keen eye on innovation. He's a self-described gym rat, spending an hour each morning working out. He meditates using Oculus Quest glasses. He's a fan of TRIP, T-R-I-P-P, the virtual reality platform that provides him with a view of his well-being from the inside out. Barry likes to read on the beach, sounds good to me, and spends most of every day talking with people all over the world. In fact, Barry's passion is speaking to others, and his staff maintains a rigorous schedule for him, beginning with calls to clients and colleagues in Asia every morning, and continuing around the globe until the end of the day. Barry's conversations, while always centering around the investment landscape, cover a wide range of topics, including the environment, real estate, and a strong focus on medical science. We've invited Barry to present his company today because he covers a very important strategic area of interest to those of us in the wellness space, and that is medical science and the intersection of medicine and wellness. Barry has invited 3 of his associates to be with us, each of whom advises Barry in different arenas: Ronald Berenson, Michael Rossbach, and Gitte Pedersen. Each of these impressive individuals are accomplished entrepreneurs in their own right, and they work closely with Barry to advise him on the scientific efficacy of potential investments. Together, they have worked to positively impact the world. Barry will introduce his colleagues, and they'll be part of the conversation today. Barry lives in Florida and New York, has 5 children, 4 grandchildren, and very much enjoys his life. Barry will no doubt be offering a good deal of advice today, but the only advice I can offer Barry is to get a new photo of himself. He is such a warm, funny, and good-looking man, but his current photo is a bit scary, and we need a good one before Tel Aviv. Barry's here today because he believes in the power of innovation, the bedrock of science, and the urgent need to help people be well. Here now, unmute yourself, is Barry Dorfman. Bottom left to unmute. There you go.
Got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Pleasure meeting everybody. Thank you, Nancy, for inviting me. I hope this is helpful to everybody. And I think it should be interesting post conversations with many of the people that have joined. I guess you'd like me to just walk a little bit through myself and what I've done and how I've done it.
Yes.
I'll try to do it time efficiently for you. So I live in New York City. I live in Boca Raton, Florida right now. Have not been in New York since March the 10th. I am a physician by training, so I practiced medicine in Florida from 1982 to 1992. Partner as a neurosurgeon. We opened up 28 medical rehab centers in Florida during that period. In 1993, we were acquired. Both my partner and I were able to retire, started making investments more in the health tech, health and wellness space in Palo Alto and in Israel. Made a significant investment with an unrelated business with my next door neighbor, who's a multi-billionaire now. Took a board seat with him, joined the executive committee. That resulted in an exit in 2002 by Deutsche Bank, acquired us for 1.2 billion. At that point, I started my family office in New York City. Presently, I have 7 full-time virtual employees there. In Boca Raton, we have 5 full-time employees, 3 in Miami, which only come in once a week, and then 2 here in Boca Raton that are with me all the time. I do have an office in Seoul, Korea, with 1 employee. I'm heavily invested in health tech and ed tech in Seoul, Korea. My investment thesis is something that I wish I can take credit for. I can't, and I know a lot of people here are going to like or dislike the person I'm going to mention, but Donald Trump many years ago indicated to me that it would be more effective to or productive to invest with the billionaires at Mar-a-Lago, where I'm a member, and my club and where I live, and it would be more successful as their industry experts in particular sectors. I've taken his advice. 73% of all my investments are with other families and industry experts. I am very active. I've done 179 investments since 2005. And again, my bias, well, I'm not going to talk on this conversation about my real estate or other venture technology holdings, but I do have a bias in the health tech space, life sciences, health and wellness, food, beauty, anything that can assist. Additionally, sustainability and ESG, trying to make this a better place. I am a global investor, so I'm invested, in many countries and continue to do so. And I think that's enough that you need about me personally at this point, correct?
Well, it's fantastic and fascinating that you were a doctor by training. Yes. So your bias towards science and evidence and medicine comes through in a lot of what you do and what you're interested in.
Correct. Yeah, I focus a lot on how, especially now with the creation or new artificial intelligence, machine learning, how it's accelerated everything from drug discovery to radiology to gynecology to every area of medicine has been evolving and accelerating. Telemedicine, digital health is a very strong part. I'm an early investor in TeleDoc. I'm an early investor in Epic, which is an EMR. After I failed multiple times by making investments with other physicians, it was too premature then. So I focus in that health tech, med tech, life science space, and always looking for innovation.
And Barry, your approach, I mean, to me, it seems unusual. You work with a number of people who vet in the scientific community, who are on this, some of whom are on this call to, be part of the conversation, who help sort of vet projects for you. Is that right? So you get a very clear sort of 360 view of something before you dive in.
Correct. I have a full team. I have 2 CIOs, chief investment officers, one in New York City and one in Miami. Both of them are totally, different skill sets. One is more on the financials and one is more on the data and the science. I have 4 analysts, 2 junior, 2 senior. And then something that I learned after making mistakes early on, I invested into what you would consider platforms that kind of match buyers and sellers. And, I would often go on and I would look and see, okay, I'm looking at something in, radiology, in the new science in AI. And I would look through all these different deals and they were terrible deals. And then my suggestion was to find advisors that are specialists in those medical device areas and let them vet through, and like Google does, put the good stuff on the top for me to evaluate. So really what I've done with my family office, and we have Dr. Rossbach here on the line, who's my chief advisor we met, I don't know how many years ago, he'll probably know better than I, he's younger than me. We met in Singapore at the Michael Milken conference, and there it was all about life sciences, and he has been probably the best asset for me in reviewing through everything. He'll tell you his background in a minute. Everything that I look at, I really run by him first. He does a quick data check on it. He looks at the science, not on the finances. Once he approves and checks the box on the science and lets me know what he thinks about it, then I bring it on to my staff and they look at the finances, they look at the references, they look at the ideas before I make a decision whether I'm going to invest or not.
I mean, that's, incredible. I know you want to get to your team and introduce them so they can become part of the conversation. But could you just give us a quick snapshot of what's in the pipeline right now? What are you working on right now? What, and what the world as it is these days has had a huge impact on health tech, wellness tech, the sciences, medicine, the extraordinary interest and focus on this everywhere. Can you just give us a little snapshot of how that has impacted what you're doing?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously everything has accelerated since the pandemic. So, digital health and the plugins to digital health is still very strong, and I think it's going to be here for a long time, and it still can be perfected and made better than it is now. I really have taken a new passion. It's been a couple of years in medicinal psychedelics. And I specifically bring that up because I think we're not out of the pandemic yet, but post-pandemic, we're going to have a lot of behavioral health issues, whether it be opioids, alcoholism, depression, and there's many things that those molecules treat. And I think that's going to be a very relevant area for me. Diabetes, again, is a big area. In cancer, as Dr. Rossbach is a specialist in immuno-oncology, I'm looking at that. I have to take a special note to, dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. My father passed away from Parkinson's, a very big charity donated to the Michael J. Fox Foundation. They kept him alive with experimental research for quite a while. I think there's going to have to be a lot looking into as we all get older into these areas of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc. So I'm very interested in that space. Other than that, I'm just usually very open. I like things that are close to FDA approval or FDA approved. It's a very long hurdle to go from these very, very early stage brilliant ideas and that are in clinical trials. Dr. Rossbach can talk about that better than I. It is a long evolutionary cycle. And, sometimes I see things now. I'll give you just an example of a company I invested into. Dermatology. I'm in Florida. I'm in the sun all the time. I go to the radiologist. He takes a couple of scrapes of me after I'm, stripped down, and he biopsies them. They always turn up negative, and I know why he's doing that because he makes $1,000 versus the $200, visit. but there's no long-term reference point for me when I come back a year later. So there was some AI that just recently was created, machine learning, that you walk into a cylinder and it does a 360 high resolution picture of you. And then the AI determines for the doctor which areas look suspicious, and it keeps the baseline in the database for future references when you come in, which I think is fabulous. So that's just one example of applying AI technology to something that's very mundane.
Barry, do you go after companies that you hear about, read about, or do you just, I mean, are you so busy with companies coming to you? Do you seek investments or do they come to you?
So I'm always looking at opportunities, and I'm, I always welcome quick phone calls. I read through the emails and I can decide. But I've been very blessed to have that ecosystem of 73% of all of my investments are with families. I actually created a team 10 years ago that what they do for me is a team of 6 women here in Florida. They go through all the funds and investments that I've made or am making in. They go through the cap table and they find other families globally that are co-invested with me. And then they arrange a phone call for me. And on that call, we exchange and share in ideas and mandates. So they always are looking at deals, many of them that they've done a year, 6 months, 3 months of due diligence. It could be, a multi-billion-dollar sovereign, or it can be a $10 million, private investor. And they've already done the diligence. They've either invested or are investing, which then speeds up the process of my diligence and making an investment through my investment committee.
Okay, so that's kind of the process for you, which no wonder you're busy on the phone night.
And I enjoy it. A lot of it's a learning process, Nancy.
Yeah.
I spend so much time speaking to other colleagues and learning about, different ideas, concepts that, and then I'll kind of pick and choose which one really resonates with me at the time. And then I can always go out as a resource to other people and say, what are you looking at in this particular space? And then they can come back to me, whether it's a fund or whether it's a direct investment. And then I run it by my advisors first, then it goes to my investment committee, then it comes back to me for an investment to them. And
can you share with us what you do seed stage and late stage, is that correct?
Correct. Okay. I'll do from seed to, pre-IPO. I like to see, we're in a very, in the United States, at least, let me address, we're in a very interesting time because the valuations really do not make sense. And when you look at a company that has $2 million in revenue, like I spoke to yesterday, and they have a $500 million valuation, it really doesn't make sense to me. And that's shared by people that are much, much smarter than me. So a lot of what I'm looking at is other areas outside Cambridge, Oxford, various areas in Lucerne in Switzerland, Germany, where Dr. Rossbach is. So I'm finding different sectors that have similar technology at more reasonable valuations.
Are you able to share with us a typical investment? Can you, or a range of the kind of investments you've made? And then let's get to Dr. Rossbach.
Yes, so range as in how much check sizes or what I'm looking at. That's interesting. When I started early, it was, seed, pre-seed, before I started the family office, which could have been $100 to $1 million. Now, just to give you an example, seed in Silicon Valley is $3 million. So, not a lot of people can write a $3 million check into that. I typically like to write 3 to 5 million. On real estate, it's 10 million. I will go smaller than that. A lot of people, of course, as soon as I tell them that, all of a sudden they said, oh, well, we can use $10 million. So we can use 5 million, even though they're only raising $1 million. So and I always tell people, don't dilute yourself from an equity position just because of me. The thing that a lot of people come to me on also is for introductions to other families that are experts. So I deal with, the Roche family. I deal with, the Woody Johnson's Foundation Family Office. I deal with the insurance companies, Aetna Ventures. I deal with Ascension. So I'm really speaking to the providers, which in the United States, at least, are the gatekeepers. So you can come up with the best widget for cardiology. I'll use an example device. And if it's not accepted by the payers, then it's highly unlikely that the hospitals will adopt it.
Right.
The other thing that I've learned, at least in the US, is that if you go to a teaching or a research hospital, they're quicker to adapt more technology than the, big New York Presbyterians, Mount Sinai's of the world, where the doctors are very stuck in what they like to do. They don't want to change their, I'm sorry, did I lose you? They don't want to change their technology, their procedures. I'll give you a very quick example. When I had my hip replaced a year ago, I own a stem cell company in Miami. Granted, not as good as the stem cells in Europe, but I was able to get the stem cells. And I said to the surgeon, who's one of the top hip surgeons in the country, I said, would you be able to, I'll supply you with the stem cells, just, put them inside the hip and then close it up. And he said, absolutely not. My surgery is my surgery, and I would not do something like that. And although when I went for my low back surgery and I went to Mount Sinai in Jacksonville, which is a teaching hospital, they did inject the stem cells for me into my low back. So it's a very, very interesting world we live in with this, adapting different procedures for, medicine and wellness.
Yeah. Amazing. And, it's good you're a consumer of it as well as an investor in it.
Yes.
That's only going to happen more and more, isn't it, as we age, however gracefully. Do you want to now, Barry, introduce, I don't know, Beatrice, if Gitte and if Ron Berenson is on the call? They are? Okay, terrific. So Barry, why don't you start with Michael, since he's been here, and give us a little sense of, Barry invited people who are his advisors to be part of this. They are also entrepreneurs. I'm assuming there have been cross investments made with these folks and their companies, but Barry, over to you to bring this home for us.
Absolutely. So I brought in 3 different people with 3 different, two different purposes. Dr. Rossbach is my medical advisor. He'll go through his background real quickly. I run everything by him for a first look. Globally, as I mentioned, we met in Singapore. He was working with the Singaporean government. We met at the Milken Conference. The other 2, Gitte is my go-to person for genomics and for mRNA, which is very important in COVID, which we're all discussing these days. She had a lab. She did a little pivot when COVID started and created a platform or a testing platform she'll discuss with COVID, but she's my go-to person on genomics. Medical devices, Dr. Berenson, he is a physician like myself, an MD, as is Dr. Rossbach. We don't want to forget about his PhDs. But Dr. Berenson is a physician by training and has created a medical device that's being used, FDA approved, for wound closure and various other procedures. He'll briefly explain that. I know nobody's marketing anything, but he's my go-to people. And what's great with everybody is that once I get my hands on something, whether it be Gitte's COVID unit or Dr. Berenson's wound closure, I can then help them, guide them into other distributors from hospitals globally to other individuals that can accelerate them and let them grow in the areas that they are. But they're just 3 people. So I'm going to turn it over to you in Germany, Dr. Rossbach, your background and a little bit you want to talk about. Sure, Nancy will guide.
Sure, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. And I'm Michael Rossbach. I'm a biochemist by training, and I come from the basic science environment. So I did my PhD at Harvard Medical School and went to Singapore, to the Genome Institute of Singapore as a postdoc in stem cell regulation and basically gene discovery. And we also thought about like spinning off a few companies. So I somehow ended up at the Milken Institute Summit because we were looking for investors, and I met Barry. And we had a nice chat, and I told him about a few projects. And as a biochemist, I had not much clue about financing and how to structure things financially. So I bluntly asked him if it's okay to reach out to him from time to time to get his advice on how to structure things from the finance view. And then he did the same and said, yeah, if we have projects in biochemistry or related to medical science, we can maybe share things and start to work together. And that was probably like, I don't know, like I'm getting gray hair now already 12 years ago or something.
Yes.
And so I'm now back in Germany, and I still have my academic appointment at the university in Munich and also at the National University of Singapore. And we nicely work together since many years. And my expertise in genomics and immuno-oncology was kind of referred to as personalized medicine when this tumor sequencing started. Then it changed towards personalized medicine and preventive medicine, and also related now to medical wellness. So we look at an awful lot of interesting projects, from devices to diagnostics, therapeutics, and whenever I can, I'm helping with the scientific due diligence, because over the years we have seen a lot of technologies, and I spent like 20 years in the lab myself, and I have a small lab in my parents' house still that I started when I was still in school. So meaning we have been there, we have done a lot of things. So you get a good gut feeling on new technologies, because every company, of course, tells you we have the best technology developed, we have the strongest IP, we are better than the competition, and you easily get a gut feeling if things work. So that helps a lot to have been and to have done it. We started a few companies, and what we always like to do is not only to get involved and write a check, but it's more like really the holistic approach to help with strategy, to help with introductions around the globe. I have a lot of connections in Asia and in Europe, Israel, and Barry, of course, also. So jumping in with introductions and companies from pharma, biotech, medtech, but also investors, is really to offer companies, often at an early stage, more than just like the money, so to speak, but to really guide them, get on hands-on involved, join the advisory board sometimes, and really jump in with our network and help develop, really do corporate venturing and development for interesting projects. And this can be in medical wellness, this can be in the healthcare tech space. Digitalization is, of course, a hot topic in pharma and biotech. And also during COVID now, we suddenly see that digitalization has really boosted developments on all angles, be it AI, be it remote work, be it development and collaboration across the globe. So we like to say never waste a good crisis. So there is also opportunities arising, and there's always interesting people to meet and to join forces with, and to have this internationally set up is just fantastic. So it has been a really great pleasure to work together. Although I have to say the pay from BLD is lousy, Barry.
Oops.
No, just kidding. But
good.
no, it has been really nice, and it is really like about a global network, to have global interactions, and be it in pharma, biotech, medical wellness, and diagnostics, therapeutics, and really bring people together from across the world to build things and to develop things to, at the end of the day, improve human mankind and living conditions. That is really fulfilling, not only looking from a financial perspective.
Michael, may I ask you, you have mentioned a couple of times medical wellness. This is of great interest to this audience, to these wonderful people who have called in, because so many touch the wellness industry. This is really an interesting intersection. Can you define that a little bit and give us maybe a couple of examples?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we started off with let's say tumor diagnostics, and for example, a concrete example is when we were at the Genome Institute of Singapore. We invested heavily in the sequencing lab, and now said, okay, we take a biopsy, we sequence the patient's tumor, and then we know what's going on, and we can guide the decision making towards the best possible treatment. in reality, what this showed is like it often doesn't work like that, because at the end of the day, a physician in the clinic might have only 2-3 drugs available. If you have a 75-year-old gastric cancer patient in Singapore, it doesn't really help if MD Anderson runs a clinical study. So there's a lot of good ideas, but we try to channel it a bit better for the really benefit of the patient. And as for your car, which suddenly sends you a text message to your phone, hey, I need to replace the oil in like 1,000 kilometers, why not move from treating patients to preventive medicine? And this is like a big topic to see, is there any kind of predispositions genetically, but also from the environment, our behavior, that we could actually tag to certain disease susceptibilities. And if we know that, we can maybe intervene earlier before a certain disease phenotype or pathology arises. And that is basically what we mean with preventive medicine and medical wellness, to sometimes take a step back and see, okay, do a checkup, not because you are suddenly sick and then you treat a symptom, but really to see if we can go in and have a medical wellness, like a holistic picture that can include diagnostics, that can sometimes include therapeutics, or boosting or strengthening the immune system, just for example. We also have understood over the last decades that the mind and body interaction is very important. We see a huge rise of psychiatric disorders right now, also because of isolation and COVID situation. So how can we kind of anticipate this and come up with therapeutics and treatment paradigms to have a holistic medical view? So that's what I mean with medical wellness. And you could also say like healthy living healthy living and active aging, so to speak.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Not just look at
thank you so much.
Treating a symptom. Yeah.
Barry, do you want to introduce your other colleagues?
I think we should go with Gitte because we can run on the genomic side. Gitte, you want to take it from here, introduce yourself, and talk about a little bit about the work you've done?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Barry, for inviting me, and thank you everybody for listening. I have a degree in chemical engineering, but I also have a business degree, and I partnered up with my younger brother who has a PhD in genetics when our parents got diagnosed with cancer, simply because we knew that if we would do standard of care, they wouldn't survive, and it was lung cancer, so it was pretty deadly. So we dived pretty deep into the data. We brought on Jesper Zeuthen, who was also a pioneer in immune oncology, and he started the Danish Cancer Institute, which is now $100 million in revenue, not for profit, not government funded, and started spinning out companies from there. So similar to what you experienced in Singapore, you have to have a critical mass, and then you can start spinning things out. We focused on RNA from the beginning, and it was actually fairly simple for us because DNA is the hard disk. RNA is what the cell is really doing. RNA codes for proteins. Proteins are targets for drugs. And we have two core competences or sciences in the company at this point. My co-founder, Morten Pedersen, my brother, has mad skills in developing new chemistries. And one of the first hurdles we had to overcome was really to enable RNA sequencing in paraffin-embedded samples, which is what we have to do when it's cancer. Everything that is being operated out of the body, all tissue biopsies get put into paraffin. This is a 50-year-old technology that enables the doctors to slice the tumor up and put it on a piece of glass and look at color cells on a microscope. And that's still how we diagnose cancer, which is pretty antiquated. Morten was able to develop a chemistry that allows us to sequence these very challenging samples. And it's not easy. If you read manuals from Illumina and others, they say we can't sequence in these kind of samples. It have to be fresh frozen. The other part of it was that once you manage to sequence the sample, you get 3 gigabytes of data, and the doctor goes, what am I supposed to do with that? So we had to build a lot of bioinformatics infrastructure, databases where we connect the dots between the aberrantly expressed genes and clinical action to a seamless platform. And we call it an RNA platform for next generation cures, because now we also know that we have the information that allows us to design novel RNA vaccines. And what we've seen during the pandemic have been pretty astonishing. It's never been done before, from code to therapeutic approved in less than 12 months. I believe we can do the same in cancer. You know, post-pandemic, I think that the COVID was really the wrench that was thrown into an already not fully functional healthcare system. And out of it have come all these new opportunities, including telehealth. So I want to end up with some thoughts about wellness, because a lot of people think about disease as, okay, you're fine, now you go to the doctor, now you have a diagnosis, and now you're sick. You know, that's not how it happens. It takes 10 years to develop cancer. We have multiple opportunities to intervene, also through lifestyle and other means. So one of the things that for us have operationally come out of the pandemic, not to mention that we're doing a lot of COVID testing now. COVID is an RNA virus, so it was fairly easy for us to do that. But we're thinking a lot about how can we detect cancer earlier so we can actually do something about it. And back to what I said before, when we see biopsies that's quote unquote normal, we can see what's called precancerous lesions. And some of those precancerous lesions are druggable. So we're coming out with a number of publications, and that one is like, what is normal? Because again, back to what I said before, are you still relying on a doctor looking at color cells on the microscope, or are we going to dive deeper into what's in the biopsy and see if there is some progression towards cancer? And the last piece is, we know we can detect cancer in a liquid biopsy sample. And there's a bunch of companies that raised a ton of money that are only looking at DNA. And DNA, it's great if you have high frequency mutated or highly mutated cancers like skin or lung. But everything that sits inside you is not highly mutated. And you can't detect it that way. But you can detect it using RNA. Yes, go ahead.
For 1 minute and ask you to just connect this for us to the investments and Barry's world. So just, you know, clearly you're steeped in this. Are you now spinning off companies, and Barry, are you investing in companies that are doing early cancer detection as part of the investments? Is that what's happening here?
Yes, absolutely. And she's one of my people, besides her company, one of my experts in the space that's kind of guided me as I make introductions to other families and other ideas.
This is great. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, information being posted in the chat, you should know, from a lot of people very interested in everything everyone is saying. And of course, everyone will be reaching out. And Michael, thank you for putting your email address and offering for people to connect, and we'll give everybody's. There's a lot of conversation that takes place in our wellness arena about cancer. There's a Wellness for Cancer nonprofit organization, an initiative with our institute. We do a lot of work in that arena and looking at preventative, you know, sort of wellness oriented approaches to things. So it's very interesting that that is one of the areas that you're investing in and looking at ways to kind of accelerate diagnosis and treatment, et cetera. So appreciate that very, very much. I'm watching also the time. Barry, you want to introduce Ron Gitte? Thank you so much.
Yes, and I'm sure everybody can communicate after, because we're keeping this on a very tight time schedule. So Dr. Berenson, he's on the line, Dr. Ronald. And again, he's a physician like myself. He'll discuss his background. He's done a lot of work in health and wellness, companies, personally as a physician. The current project that he's working on, that I'm working with him on, that I'm just fascinated, is his wound closure company. But if Ron, you focus on your background a little bit, your history in health and wellness, and then maybe touch on, how the wound closure may fit into the scheme of things, would be great.
Sure, nice to be here. I hope everybody can hear me. As Barry said, I am a physician. I have a background in oncology. My father died when I was 12 of brain cancer, and that pushed me into that field along with my identical twin brother. And I attended Stanford University, then went to Yale Medical School, then did internal medicine at the University of Utah, and then went back to Stanford for medical oncology, and then came up here to Seattle to the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, which I'd been affiliated with since medical school, and began to work on stem cells. And I actually did the first stem cell transplant in the world in 1988 and formed a company called CellPro, which did really well, and got immersed into biotechnology and been working in the field ever since. I started a second company, which was one of the first immuno-oncology companies working on CAR T-cell therapy. And then I went on to the University of Washington, and there I was what's called an entrepreneur in residence. And it was like being a kid in the candy store. I got to see everything going on in medicine at the university. And I met with a professor who is working on what's called microneedles, which are used actually in the cosmetic industry by many dermatologists, and also in drug delivery. They put drugs on these little tiny needles and are able to deliver drugs to the skin. Well, having spent my life dealing with the FDA, I decided that we're not going to put drugs on there. We're going to turn these things into little staples. And we made, over a period of 5 years, microstaples, put them on a bandage backing, and could use them to painlessly close wounds like surgical incisions and lacerations. I then became interested in how we could apply this beyond the hospitals, where we were very successful in the last 2 years, introducing our product into Cleveland Clinic, University of Pittsburgh, major centers around the country. And then COVID happened, as we all know, in March. Hospitals shut down. What are we going to do? So we went into the consumer business, and we launched our product onto Amazon, and it took off like wildfire. And we're now moving into some of the largest pharmacy chains in the United States, if not the world. CVS, which is second largest in the US, Walgreens. We're going to be on Walmart, a number of these different institutions. And what's really great for me is to empower patients and people to be able to treat themselves and not have to go to hospitals, not have to go to clinics, not depend on doctors, when they can do these things themselves, and they can really, really take hold of their own healthcare, and we get to see the results. This is what's great about what I do, is I can see helping people, and I can see it in a very direct way. And many times in my background, I spent developing oncology drugs and cancer drugs, and they never get to the finish line. And here we get to the finish line, and you see the patients and you see the results. And I must say it's quite gratifying to be able to see that. And even myself and my cousins and my friends using this device is just a wonderful, wonderful experience. I would also say, parenthetically, I guess, that one of the things that's really challenging in this field, and it's always tension, is between doing something that's incredibly innovative and doing something that actually makes sense and will be a product. And it's, there's always this mantra, as was said, with the standard and saying it can't be done. That's kind of the story of my life. And somebody told me when I was, one of my mentors said, that's music to my ears. On the other hand, you have to be somewhat realistic and make sure that what you're doing really has a target and a path to success. And I like to use an analogy too, though, and that is Lord Kelvin. Lord Kelvin is known for the Kelvin scale, which we use to measure temperature. What people don't know is he died thinking the world is flat. So you don't have to be right every time. If you can be right 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10, you can be a fabulous success. The other mantra I want to say, a couple of them, is a pioneer. I've always been a pioneer, where a pioneer ends up with arrows in their back and mud on their face most of the time. But you have to be willing to drive and get through it. And I wanted to just finally say that it took 5 years to develop this little simple product, which maybe I can just put up on the screen. And we went through a lot of different, you're going to have to disable, I think, for me to show our product. I don't know.
You know, Ron, maybe the thing to do is when we send the follow-up email, which we do, let's send the product, let's send all the links, let's send whatever you want to send rather than do that now.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we went through so many challenges and so many ups and downs, but we always knew with the great, brilliant engineer that I had and work with that we'd get there. We would get there, and we finally did. We had a lot of false starts along the way, and you have to be willing to get there.
You know, I thank you for that, and thank you for the product. This is the wound care product, right? And we will send everybody the information because people are asking about it. You know, what is clear, and Barry, it's obviously very clear why these three people advise you, so incredibly smart and steeped in not just the science and the medicine, but also in business. You talk a little bit, Barry, about, you know, the power of entrepreneurship. I mean, I think that what is so interesting here, and what, you know, Ron just touched on and the others have as well, is that you can have an idea, or you can have this, you know, thought about something, but business drives this, innovation drives it, but it also has to be practical. Just talk a little bit about the power of business to make these changes in the world of science and medicine.
Yeah, you know, I remember so vividly the early days when I retired and was investing in Palo Alto, and I would sit there at the Rosewood in Palo Alto on the balcony. Everybody's been there if you've been to Palo Alto, and you see these 20-year-old kids from Microsoft, from Facebook, from Apple, just talking about ideas. And it's just, to me, my hair on my arms stood up, you know, how brilliant that they are and where they think. And then that's a very interesting ecosystem, Silicon Valley, because as Ron knows, if you're there in the technology side, you can get funded. If you're from Microsoft and you left Microsoft and you partnered up with somebody from Apple, you could get funded. And then it's a matter of perseverance. And a lot of these people have failed and will continue to get funded because of the way they think innovatively. You know, the way they think, how persistent they are, how determined they are, is really why they're getting funded. And eventually, like everything else, it's a numbers game. They may not always get it on the first time. So, and I found the same thing in Israel. You know, I went to Israel, same thing with the innovation over there. And it just leads me to something that I've been really hearing a lot of. It's, you know, the young generation, the millennials, the Gen Zs, those, if you're looking at where the future is going to go, you know, in a product and innovation, just listen to them. They're the ones that are going to create these ideas or understand or give you an idea and say, wow, that's very easy to do. Why didn't I think of that? And if you keep on listening to old people like me, I need things to help me with my iPhone or my computer, you know, great business, but these young kids can do it much more efficiently and more accurately. And those are the businesses. So I kind of listen to, it's like everybody knows Warren Buffett used to go into the mall and send people in there and see everybody swamped, then he would buy it. That's what he would invest into. I kind of listen to these young people and I love it. That's why I speak to so many people all the time, globally.
And Barry, what's the advice you would give someone who is wanting an investment, feel they have a, a company, an idea, a product, a service, or something that is ready for that, what is the most important thing they need to know before, let's say, coming to you and your team with something?
Yeah, it's very important to have a real team. With me, you can be, great PhD, you came out of Stanford, but if you don't have a team together, a real team, to me, it's too early for me. I don't mean it may not be successful. For me, you have to have a team together besides the concept, the idea. So I'm always looking for that. And then with this pandemic, something that I've learned from and many of my colleagues in the family office space, institutions included, references. A lot of people are not doing face-to-face. I invest in India, I invest in Africa, I can't constantly be going there. I'm not sending my staff, but references. That makes a difference for me on the personal investment side. And then utilizing advisors. I'm good at what I'm good at, but I don't clearly know everything. And I think that having good advisors or go-to people to give you an idea, does this science make sense? Does it not make sense? Is it going to be antiquated in 5 years? COVID tracing, I looked at a COVID tracing, incredible. But what's going to happen with that technology? I asked them, how can you pivot that into something else once the pandemic is done, which may be a long time. We may have all this going on, but what can you do with that product? And those are very interesting questions. And I get that from really smart people that I talk to on a regular basis.
Can you share with us your, a great triumph that you've had and a failure that you've had? It's always helpful. We all learn from our mistakes. It's always interesting to know people such as yourself when they've had, the ups and downs we all have had.
So the great one, I have so many, it's a great question because I was interviewed last week and you're the only second interview I've ever done. So when I was in Silicon Valley, again, I got to meet Peter Thiel personally. So, I followed a lot with him. And the great triumph with him, I'm going to use is Bitcoin and Ethereum and blockchain. So he did have a of 20 people in the room. And he said, remember in the 80s, everybody listened about computers. And, nobody really, I think at that time, I remember going to a Milken conference and it was Bill Clinton on his second term. Don't quote me on the numbers, but it's out there somewhere. He said, everybody, my second term, there was maybe 100 www companies on his second term, which most people here remember that. Now look at how many we have. So when Peter Thiel said that to me, it resonated. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, blockchain has really been very, very, and I believe the digital currency is going to be here. Failure, I invested into a company in Seoul, Korea, which was my largest investment I ever made. I did it because of the people involved, really without doing the research. I had nobody on the ground in Korea at that time. And I wound up losing 100% of my investment.
Ouch.
So you live and learn with that. So what could I have done differently there? I probably should have had people on the ground following up on the company. But, I'm the big boy. We all make mistakes and we learn to live and, lose.
Yeah. And ever have a unicorn?
Zoom.
Ah.
And that again was through Palo Alto, through relationships there. That was probably the biggest one that I had.
We are happy to support you in everything we are all doing these days. What do you think where's the greatest opportunity right now at the intersection of wellness and medicine and investing in technology and stuff? Because we hear an awful lot, the parallel pandemic of mental illness, the psychedelics is a big thing we hear about, CBD, all of these kinds of things. Where do you think the greatest opportunities lie these days?
There's so many. I'm probably the wrong person. I'm such a broad individual in investments. I keep on focusing. Everybody who spoke on my team really had a similar resonating theme. The digital health we talked about. I just think that, post-pandemic, whenever that does, behavioral health is going to be a significant area, how to treat it. What's happening in Florida now, a lot of people, a lot of them went to jail years ago for alcohol and drug rehab centers. They're coming back now rampantly in preparation for, and in the United States, in other areas as well. Again, behavioral health, I think. And then what nobody is really paying attention to is behavioral health for the children that were cooped up, that were hearing their parents arguing, or they didn't have a housekeeper and they got chores and they were studying it. That is, nobody has really identified that. And I'm frightful for what's going to happen with some of these social skills and other areas that some of these children experience. I haven't quite got my arms around that yet.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of research coming out about the kids who have, never been exposed, little ones who have never, haven't had a head cold yet because they've never been at a, out of their homes or whatever, and what that's going to do, to immune systems and everything else. Any parting words of wisdom from you or any of your team for the eager people on this call, who many of whom have really interesting businesses at various stages of development and might want to be in touch? Just, you got 2 minutes left. Last word from everybody on this.
Yeah, I spoke enough. Dr. Berenson, Dr. Rossbach, anything?
A word of wisdom, a thought for people wanting to talk to you guys about investing.
Well, I would say network. Barry mentioned references, and that's how Barry and I got to meet. It was through another family office. And I think that my experience fundraising is that network is really super important.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Michael?
No, I was just to only add a sentence and say, yeah, this is actually exactly the point. Like, a global network, be open to new connections, and there's always more opportunities than anyone can address alone. So to team up and jointly address questions and challenges. And with every crisis and challenge, there's always new opportunities. So I always try to look at things from the bright side, and that helps.
Yeah, I have two aspects of that. And actually Barry brought me to Ming, who's actually is a multi-billionaire. And I started talking to him about a month ago and about an investment. And we spoke for an hour. At the end of the hour, I asked him, what's your process? And he says, this is the process. I get to know you, I like you, I invest.
Okay, there you go. I'm going to stop you there. It is 11 o'clock. Network. There's a lot of that going on in the chat. I will just reiterate, we are sharing both the recording of the call and the chat with everyone who registered for this call, which is almost 1,000 people from 84 countries. So a lot of networking to be done. We'll share Barry's contact information as well as his team. And we will hope lots of rich and wonderful business grows from this. If you would all unmute yourself and give Barry, Ron, Gitte, and Michael a tremendous round of global love.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye bye.